What I'd like to do today is um, introduce the syllabus. I put together, during the COVID era, I put together a combined economics class for self-study online based on about 13 years of teaching experience I had teaching the introductory micro and macro classes in economics. And I've had these on my teaching modules YouTube channel, but I wanted to now present the syllabus, which ties all of these ideas together and all of these teaching modules together. And this syllabus can be used as a key to study these introductory economic ideas. Economics started out as political economy, and then it became branched out political economy into politics or political science, and then into political economy, and then into economics. And then so economics was a field of its own until the 1930s. And only in the 1930s did economics branch into macroeconomics, Keynesian economics, and then microeconomics, which is individual behavior. So you can combine micro and macro into the same economics curriculum, which I have done. So the syllabus I'm going to present to you now contains references to all the teaching modules I have on YouTube. And it's a combination of micro and macro introductory classes all into one. So it's all the economics, introductory economics that you need to know. And I call it economic principles. You can access the syllabus on my Cameron Economics homepage. So CameronEconomics.com, then teaching, and here's the syllabus to accompany. Here's Cameron's teaching modules on YouTube. That's right. And then so here's the syllabus itself with I use Mankiw's book. Gregory Mankiw is the chair of the Harvard University Economics Department. He has the best-selling economics textbook in the United States or in the world. You don't necessarily need to read Mankiw's book because all of the ideas are contained in the teaching modules, but that are on YouTube. But still, it's a good reference to have if you can get it for free online. And then the two key things in free market economics, which I teach, the two of the founding papers, founding ideas are Hayek's Use of Knowledge in Society and Kreuger's Political Economy of the Rent-Seeking Society. So these two articles are key, and they're available here. Again, you don't need to read anything if you can understand the teaching modules. So I start with an introduction to economics using the Keynesian equation. And so I start with an introduction, and then Mankiw has 10 what does he say, principles of economics. People face trade-offs. The cost of something is what you give to get it. Rational people think at the margin. People respond to incentives. Trade can make everyone better off. Markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. Governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. A country's standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. prices rise when the government prints too much money, as we've seen during this COVID era or a period of Bidenflation. And society faces a short-term trade-off between inflation and unemployment. We'll start with, so I've further divided Mankiw's 10 principles of economics into two main categories. The first is how people make decisions, praxology. The theory and study of individual behaviors, praxology. And then the next category is the theory and study of how people interact based on their individual incentives, their individual social construction. How people interact is the second category, and that's catalaxy. So both within praxology and catalaxy, you have individual agency, where the object of analysis is the individual, and then the individual interacting with other individuals. Then that's microeconomics, when you're looking at individual behavior and then individuals interacting with others. That's and you have individual agency, that's microeconomics. Then you have you abstract from individual behavior, and that's macroeconomics. So the first part of the syllabus is the micro, and then the second half, or the second part, is macro. So the way the syllabus works then, and the way you can study these topics is, let's start with people face trade-offs, praxology, Mankiw's economic principle number 1. The main subtopics here are efficiency versus equality, which you can find in Mankiw's chapter 1. And then differing views on inequality, Marx, Veblen, and Hayek on differing views on inequality, and then how the welfare state has become bankrupt. These are in chapter 1 of Mankiw, and then on the YouTube, the demographic shifts in the fiscal cliff you can find on YouTube, and then life cycle economics and inequality are also. So all of these topics are here on my teaching modules: efficiency versus equality, negative and positive rights, demographic shifts, and life cycle economics. And then here's the fiscal cliff on YouTube. List the resources and readings. The supplemental reading material and the additional references are referenced within the content of the syllabus. And here's the additional supplementary YouTube videos, which complement the principles in the syllabus, and as well as reference materials, again, found within the syllabus. So you have topics and references. Start with an introduction and then praxology. So the first thing is people face trade-offs. You can't have as much of everything as you want. And then, so what is opportunity cost? The second principle is, what is opportunity cost? What do you give up to get something else? And then there's different economic models that show that. The main idea behind the people face trade-offs is economic growth by definition creates inequality. So individuals in a society have differing aesthetics and values. Do they want to see economic growth, which raises the standards of living of everybody, or would they like to see more in short-term distribution of wealth? Because economic growth by definition creates inequality. So you have long and short-term trade-offs. So we discuss those in people face trade-offs. And then the second principle is opportunity cost. Something's value is what you give up to get it. And the models there would be the production possibility frontier. And then we look at the ultimate cost, which is opportunity cost. And then we tie the opportunity cost and the loanable funds market to the capital structure in the economy. And All of this is spelled out in these teaching modules on my YouTube channel. And the third economic principle is people think at the margin. Rational people think at the margin. So we look at what in economics, what does rationality mean? Rationality, the short term mean, the quick and easy answer is human beings are rational because we have the ability to think towards the future. So rational people have the ability to look at themselves and towards the future, then think at the margin and realize that not every decision you make is a make or break decision. There's many decisions that you make as you trade off one thing for another. So that's based on psychology, the subjective theory of demand, meaning that you're willing to pay less for an additional good of that, an additional item of that good, because each individual item brings you less utility because of scarcity value. The more scarce something it is, the more scarce something is, the more valuable it is. And that's explained in the subjective value of the marginal revolution in economics, where we'll talk about marginal utility and relating marginal utility and demand theory to rationality and thinking at the margin. And economic rationality, marginal revolution utility, and interpersonal comparison of utilities are popular teaching modules because they are difficult subjects, but they get a lot of views. And so then the fourth category in praxeology is people respond to incentives, which is incentives matter. If you want to discourage behavior, you tax it. If you want to encourage behavior, you subsidize it. And so we'll look at differing views of incentives. For example, the tax laws and certain federal laws prioritize what we can call cronyism. For instance, the US agriculture law subsidizes huge agribusinesses in the rural areas for the Republican vote, and it also subsidizes food stamps in the urban areas for the Democrat vote. So this is known as crony capitalism. And so the individuals react to incentives. Agribusinesses tend to invest more than they should and make more profit because they get tax incentives. And then the Democrats in the cities would like to distribute as many food stamps as possible because that then gets them votes. So, and the teaching modules here would be taxes and subsidy, rent seeking explained, and Laffer curve. Rent seeking explained is also a popular teaching module. The Laffer curve shows how you can actually lower taxes and tax revenues will go up. And there's two historical examples that I show in the Laffer curve teaching module. And then economics is all about prices. Economic organization is all about prices at local and decentralized levels. So the whole idea behind the market setting prices at a local and decentralized level, Hayek calls that the use of knowledge in society. Without that price setting at local and decentralized levels, you'll have economic inefficiency and poverty and corruption. If you have politically set prices instead of market set prices, you have a whole lot of problems which are inherent. And as we move from praxeology to catalaxy, now we look at individual behavior in relation to others. And one of the principles, besides opportunity cost and other items from praxology in catalaxy, a well-known economic principle, is comparative advantage, that trade can make everyone better off. And we show this how, using economic models, how trade can make everyone better off using the model of comparative advantage. And we also show it in welfare economics using supply and demand, consumer surplus. And then these results make certain assumptions. And the main assumption under trade can make everyone better off is that you have factor mobility, that the factors of production can seek their highest returns without without any intervention. So when you start having the intervention is when you start having problems, and that's apparent when you look at comparative advantage, which is our first economic principle under catalaxy. And the teaching modules under comparative advantage or trade can make everyone better off are these. Again, the marginal productivity theory of distribution helps explain how the market works. And then the economic principle number 6 under catalaxy again is markets are a good way to organize economic activity. And we show how markets are a good way to organize economic activity by showing what happens when the government intervenes, and then the either intended or unintended consequence of what happens when the government intervenes, to show why markets are a good way to organize economic activity. And we give several examples of supply and demand examples of what happens when you have intervention and how this causes inequality and deadweight loss, causes absolute welfare loss when you have intervention. And we give several examples in the wage labor market, the market for solar panels, higher education, healthcare, and also give some examples of environmental degradation due to government intervention. And we also have as part of the teaching learning modules, we also use some of our Hardfire TV programs, and we have a Hardfire TV program on the economics of disasters, which you can find on YouTube as well. And then also under markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. This is microeconomics now, specific applied micro, where you get into the theory of the firm and competition. So we look at why do firms exist, and this is where Ronald Coase comes into play here. And then we look at these models of competition, from monopolistic competition through oligopoly to monopoly. And then we look at the various assumptions that economists use to make the determination of what type of market structure you have. So these models, and then a discussion about the models, an over-reliance on these models then becomes a technocratic science instead of something that's actually useful in society. So there's that's called positivism, an over-reliance on science to model and shape and form society. So for a good introduction to these models in microeconomics, here you can see these teaching modules here. Competition theory, the cost curves especially are the foundation of microeconomics. The next economic principle under catalaxy is governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. The neoclassical economics model assumes that all costs and benefits are contained within a market transaction. However, there's externalities and spillovers. Perhaps not all the costs are contained in exchange, and you could get negative externalities such as pollution, or say that some of the costs can't be captured, such as national defense, where you have the free riding problem. So we look at public goods and market externalities and spillovers, and governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. And we define public goods, and we find that the definition of public goods becomes larger and larger and leads to more and more paternalism. We also did a Hardfire show on public goods, Hardfire TV on public goods, and also looking at incentives and how New York City is overregulated and overtaxed, so people have the incentive to leave New York. So sometimes governments cannot improve upon market outcomes. Then we leave individual agency and go to macroeconomics, or how the economy as a whole works. Now we're abstracting from individual agency, and the original Keynesian economics assumes that government is a benevolent dictator, but we apply public choice economics and public choice theory and determine that politicians and bureaucrats and technocrats and experts are also self-interested. So the first category in macroeconomics is the Keynesian definition and explanation for gross domestic product, how the economy is measured. And then we also visit historically classical liberalism prior to Keynesian economics, and compare that with early capitalism, compare that with modern capitalism. And then we look at the institution of Bretton Woods created after World War II, and how they were originally intended to reinstitute the early capitalism institutions, but in fact have created unintended consequences like perpetuating worldwide poverty, for example, the World Bank. So the teaching modules for a country's standards of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. We revisit the Keynesian and Hayekian ideal types. We look at inflation, production, and real income, and a comparison of Hayek versus Keynes ideal types as we look at the differing arguments for and against government intervention. The next economic principle: prices rise when the government prints too much money. This is Milton Friedman. Inflation everywhere and at all times is a monetary phenomenon. We explain monetary theory looking at Keynesian monetarist and Austrian monetary theories, and then look at how inflation is a invisible regressive tax. It helps the wealthy as their assets increase, but hurts the less wealthy as their cost of living increases. So we look at properties of money, the quantity theory of money, and then look at how monetary policy and inflation affects international capital flows. Then the last economic principle, again under macro, where we're assuming a benevolent dictator that the state knows best on how to manage business cycles. Economic principle number 10, society faces a short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. So we give definitions to the business cycle and differing definitions of unemployment. We look at how price measures are price levels are measured, indexing. So we have definitions of recession and depression, and under our teaching modules, definitions of unemployment. And then we also look at how how macroeconomics was intensified during the Great Recession, and then during the coronavirus period. There's two parts of macroeconomics: fiscal policy, where we look at aggregate supply and aggregate demand and government spending, and then monetary policy, where we look at the Federal Reserve or central bank monetary policy. But both of these are related, because oftentimes the government will borrow money under fiscal policy, which is then monetized through monetary policy. So you'll see that we've done a Hardfire TV show, The Problem with Macroeconomics. And And here's the teaching modules for learning about macroeconomic interventions. And then we also have other materials relatedly. Thank you. I hope you enjoy your self-study in the principles of economics.